Joining me now, I have Phil Metzger and Charlie Detroit. Am I saying your last name right?
It's Detelich.
Detelich. Oh, shoot. I totally confused. I'm sorry.
So
This is the problem about reading about people's work is you can learn to respect everything that they're doing without knowing them or how to say their names. So we're here for the next 49 minutes until we go back to Minds on the 49s to discuss what is it that makes a planet. And in our Minecraft build, we've included the 34 largest objects in the solar system. I think we actually had to cut it down to 32 because things beyond Eris didn't fit. Um, we're building to scale. There was a mathematical limit within Minecraft. Um, and this included moons, it included the asteroid series, it included all these wonderfully geologically active worlds, orbiting planets, orbiting the sun, orbiting near one another. And I use the word worlds because no one's going to yell at me when I use the word worlds. But the two of you have fairly strong opinions. And Phil, I'm going to go to you first. Can you give us a little bit of. Actually, I'm going to ask both of you to introduce yourselves first. Phil, could you introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay, sure. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, you're
Is
a
my mic
bit
okay?
soft. If you could project your voice, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I'll just sit a little closer and talk loud. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I'm Phil Metzger. I'm with the faculty at the University of Central Florida as a planetary scientist, and I do mostly technology development, technologies that would interact with the surfaces of bodies like the moon or asteroids or Mars. And I got into this thing about what is a planet because my friend Alan Stern asked me to blog about it some years ago before Pluto was visited by the New Horizons spacecraft. And when I did that blogging, I read about it and I thought, wow, you know what? I think Alan is right. And so I've been writing papers about it since then.
And Charlie, what got you into this debate, which seems like a somewhat terrifying place to be as an early career researcher?
I am a master's student that studies planetary geology at University of Alaska Anchorage. Um, and I was in the fourth grade class the year that Pluto was demoted, which is the year that you learn about planets. What started it for me was just kind of that experience of having a planet demoted right in front of you when you're learning about it. And it sort of sent me on like this personal crusade throughout the years to try and make Pluto and everywhere else in the solar system a planet again. And so for this specifically, I was friends with another scientist who introduced me to this group. And so that's why I'm here.
And and Phil, here's where I'm going to ask you to take us back. And I've admitted this to our audience several times today. I am Team Ceres. I think Ceres should still be a planet. It was originally a planet. And you can make other things planets, but only on the condition that Ceres gets to be a planet. Give us some historical perspective. Now you know my perspective.
All right. Well, you're going to like what I have to say then. So we have always heard, at least I always heard, that the asteroids were planets, but then after they discovered about 15 or so, which would be right around 1850 or somewhere around the middle of the 1800s, by that time they had discovered about 15, and then supposedly they said, wow, these things share orbits, and somehow we just know that planets are things that don't share orbits, and therefore we're going to say they're not planets anymore. And so that's the story we've all been told. And that was the argument that was used to say Pluto should not be a planet as well, because we discovered it shares orbits. But when I did analysis of the literature to find out what actually happened in the 1800s, that is not what happened. Not at all.
We've been lied to.
We've been deceived. Well, I think the people who wrote that probably tricked themselves. I don't think they lied. I think they just got confused. So what really happened was that the public tended to ignore asteroids. But the scientists, if you read the scientific literature, they continued calling them planets all the way into the 1950s. And they would say that there were three kinds of planets. There were terrestrial planets like the Earth, the Moon, Mars, and Venus. There are giant planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And then they would say there are the small planets that are between Mercury and Jupiter. And so it was one of the three classes, co-equal with the other two classes of planets. And they would say things like, this is an IAU resolution. It said, if a planet passes by the orbit of Mars, be sure to take at least 2 observations of it. So they were calling it a planet even into the 1950s. But when they decided they're not going to, they shouldn't be planets, that happened because of some advances in science. They started to have better understanding of accretion, how planets grow. They used to think that a planet had to start large. It would have to be a gravitational instability in the disk around the star, and that instability would bring a large amount of matter all at once. And so it would start out round. But then they started to realize, no, accretion can happen, so little bits can connect together, and you can get these lumpy objects. And they decided that when they get to the point that they get large enough to become round, that's when they become a protoplanet. And that first appeared in print in 1953 in a paper by Gerard Kuiper, where he was talking about the asteroid belts. Right at that paper, all the theorists stopped calling them planets. And within the next 10 years, the entire community stopped calling them planets, except for Ceres. There are a bunch of papers throughout that period that said, well, Ceres actually is a protoplanet. And there are a few papers saying that maybe the next 2 or 3 largest as well might be protoplanets and might be planets. So that lower edge, the lower boundary of what is a planet wasn't quite precise, but everybody agreed Ceres should still be a planet.
And I love the fact that my favorite world got held out as still a planet. Charlie, with what your research is finding, can you give us a quick summary of how you've seen this debate evolve over your lifetime, which apparently isn't much longer than my podcast? You have made me feel old.
Yeah, so when Pluto was demoted, I think everyone was a little bit in shock, and people view the IAU as this sort of governing body for planets and naming things. And so people have generally followed what they've said. But I've noticed that in more recent years, people are starting to sort of reject the IAU as an official governing body for names. Especially, this is just something that I personally noticed, and have started to call things like Pluto, Triton, Europa, all planets.
So you just named a moon.
Mm-hmm.
That broke my brain a small bit. I use the word worlds. Reason one is it prevents people from being angry at me, and I am anger adverse. But the other reason is there's all these little geologically active lumps of stone and lava and ice and other stuff orbiting Saturn, orbiting Jupiter. Triton is bigger than Pluto. And so in coming up with a definition of what makes a planet, where do you stop?
So the definition that we give is something that has not undergone nuclear fusion, so it's not a star.
Yes.
And it also has enough gravity to remain round or be in hydrostatic equilibrium. And so essentially anything that fits those main criteria, which are intrinsic properties of those bodies, is a planet.
So, Phobos and Deimos orbiting Mars, not planet.
No. Yes.
So Phil, how you do so many different things. How did you get drawn into this particular debate other than Alan Stern, who is a force of nature, to be entirely fair?
Yeah, well, it was really just Alan. He asked me to blog about it. I researched it, and I realized, wow, Alan's right. The IAU definition is based on what we would call presentism, the presentism fallacy, where they took a modern perspective and they reinterpreted history based on modern assumptions and tried to use that revisionism to justify what they're doing today. And when I realized that, I thought, well, we can do better than that. And so I started researching the history. And just like Charlie said, we consider moons to be planets. And that's actually been the mainstream view since the Copernican revolution. Galileo, when he discovered the 4 moons orbiting Jupiter, he called them planets. He also called them
Really?
stars. Yeah, he also called them stars because planets were considered, a star just meant any light in the sky. So the luminous bodies, which they
Were
also,
comets considered stars?
yes. I mean, I hesitated because before, a little ways earlier in history, they thought the comets were an atmospheric phenomenon below the
Yes.
moon. But after they realized that they were higher up in space, I'm not sure if they were calling them stars. They did call them planets, sometimes, not very often. But they did definitely say that moons are planets because the concept of a planet had nothing to do with what it orbited or how it orbited. The concept of a planet from Galileo was that it's a geological body that shares common geophysics with the Earth. And he didn't do this, but everybody immediately, including Kepler, within a couple of years, Kepler and then everybody else made the conclusion that all the planets must be inhabited by intelligent beings.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
if
intimidating to
Yeah,
imagine.
so Huygens was writing about it. I mean, they were speculating on how the people that live on the moon must be taller because gravity is less, and what kind of water do they have on, I'm trying to remember, was it Jupiter or Neptune? They didn't know about Neptune yet, but they were speculating about how water would be different so that it doesn't freeze that far from the sun. It was all very teleological. Because here's the thing. They used to believe that the planets were created to serve the Earth by orbiting the Earth and mediating influences, which is where astrology came from. But when you take that away, if you say they don't orbit the Earth, then the question is, well, what's their purpose? And they had to come up with a purpose, and they couldn't come up with any purpose related to how it served the Earth. So they came up with the idea that they must all have their own worlds. And by the way, the word world was a different meaning. The word
Really?
world, a world was on a planet, but the world was not the planet. The world was the civilization that was on the planet.
So the ecosystem was the world.
Well, we have expanded the concept of world. So now it doesn't necessarily have to have a civilization to be a world. It
Yeah.
just has to be an interesting, immersive environment on the surface so that if you went there, it would be interesting to the human mind. That's pretty much what we mean by world nowadays. So when you say Titan is a world, what you're saying is that to the human mind, if you went there, it would be immersively fascinating.
Again, Phobos and Deimos don't count.
No, they don't rise to the level of world. But if you read the literature, the recent literature, people are saying Bennu is a world. People are saying that Comet 67, I forget the number, the one that was visited just recently by the European spacecraft.
67 GP
Yeah, they were calling that a
or
world.
CG.
Yeah, so
Yeah, Chirigiri.
the level to be a world is less than the level to be a planet based on the way people have been using the words.
I agree with that. And it it's always amazing to me how the use of language changes over time. I spend far more of my time communicating on the internet than I do communicating in real life. I'm one of those people. I admit to this freely. And the dialect of the internet is somewhat different. The dialect of fiction has changed over time, and the dialect of science, which includes human beings who read, who talk, who interact, it is changing and has pockets of different meaning in different places, which is part of what makes all of this so complicated. Charlie, how do you see a path forward to trying to get a unified conception of planet once again so that we're all on the, well, same definition?
Well, I think that work like Phil is doing is really, really essential to the cause. But I think at the end of the day, it's really getting a cultural shift to people switching to using the word planet. And so I think that just by referring to worlds as planets in the literature helps a lot with that. And so it just sort of develops a consistent usage and just kind of agreeing that certain groups of people should not decide the definition of scientific definitions. Those should come up organically in the literature. And so I think if we just keep using the word planet to refer to things that are planets, I think that that'll definitely help.
I think Charlie made a great point there, because when you look at the literature to see how people have used the word planet, I mentioned how we stopped calling asteroids planets.
Yeah.
And that happened 150 years after the discovery of Ceres. So, but it happened organically. Nobody had to take a vote to say, should asteroids be planets or not? It came out in the science when consensus developed. And another very interesting thing, in the 1960s, when we started sending spacecraft to the outer solar system and getting a closer look at these worlds around those gas giants, immediately in the literature, we started calling them planets again. And so we've documented 140 cases with just a nominal search of the literature. Nominally scraping the surface of the literature, we easily found 140 papers in recent years of scientists calling Titan, Europa, Ganymede, Io, Triton, calling these bodies planets. Not just planetary bodies, but calling them planets. And so we've documented what are the types of usages, and it's always related to complex geophysics. When people want to talk about the magnetic fields or talk about the atmosphere or the crustal dynamics or the mantle, that's when you see the word planet popping up. And so I think it's the same thing that happened with Galileo. When Galileo put a telescope on the moon and saw mountains, he said, that's geophysics. And so he said, well, if a planet has geophysics, then the Earth must also be a planet. And therefore the other planets further out must also have geophysics.
And this brings up both a scary and an awesome concept that how we understand the universe is fluid, and how we use language is fluid. And the reason that this can be problematic is we have classes like Charlie's fourth grade class where there's a teacher who wants to write an exam that has yes or no answers, and everything is delineated. And how do we cope with the human desire to classify things and juxtapose it with our scientific understanding is fluid and definitions change as our understanding changes?
Well,
Either of you can jump in.
Well, I think the purpose of science communication is to expand our horizon beyond our normal day-to-day life, right? So people used to call whales and dolphins fish. And in the 1700s, it was a lively debate as the scientists tried to convince people that they're not fish, they're mammals. And in everyday experience, they were fish because they swim in the water, they have fins, they get caught in your nets. But scientists thought that it would enrich the world if we could convince people to care about concepts that go beyond their everyday experience. And you know, we shape language to be useful. So I'm wearing a blue shirt. I don't call it a blueling. Like, I don't say everything in my life that's blue is a blueling. Like, I drive a blueling, that's a blueling up in the heavens over our head, the blue sky. We don't name them bluelings because that wouldn't be useful. So we pick a different basis to name things. But in science communications, we're trying to get people to go beyond what is everyday useful and enrich their set of concepts by things that we hope will be useful in the future to shaping our democratic society as we're dealing with a broader range of issues in the world. So we're trying to get people to reshape their language based on new concepts that aren't useful yet to them.
And one of the things that I've seen happening along the way is this desire to both declassify and overclassify simultaneously. All right, fine, we'll make everything a planet, but then I'm calling these Plutinos, I'm calling these asteroids, I'm calling these, and our definitions that we use for different worlds have expanded to be not just rocky and gas giants, but now we have small rocky worlds, we have Earths, we have super Earths, we have sub Neptunes, we have ice giants, we have gas giants, we have hot Jupiters, we have massive Jupiters. Does it make more sense to allow a word like planet to incorporate this rich variety of worlds and then subcategorize, or are we just crazy?
I think it makes sense, just based on the fact, like, a relation to animals, and all of these things can be part of the animal kingdom, but we have different species and genuses that help us better define what that is. And I think that in schools where we're learning about the planets, we're taught to just memorize the names of the 8 main planets. And instead of doing that, I think it would be much more useful to teach students about the diversity in our universe and about there are places that are made out of ice and rock and all these sorts of other things, and they have different intrinsic properties and things like that. And that's just much more useful to teach students that there are different types of planets that have a fundamental relation to something about that planet rather than just a name.
And I've seen people, to build on what Charlie said, I've seen people criticize the concept of a planet by saying it's too diverse and it's not a useful word because it's so diverse. But I would argue to the contrary. It's the concept of a planet that was given to us by Galileo is one of the most insightful and important concepts in all of reductionist scientific history.
So you need to explain what reductionist means here.
Okay, reductionism in science is where we're trying to explain the complex phenomenology that we see in the cosmos by a simple set of explanations. So if you've got a simple set of laws of nature, then the interaction of those laws creates all this emergent complexity. Like an example would be if you heat water from the bottom, it becomes unstable. And so when the hot water tries to rise, it has to break into plumes, and you get this Rayleigh-Taylor instability, and you get these plumes and vortices, and in the atmosphere it happens and makes thunderclouds, and all this complexity just comes out naturally just from the density change of a liquid in gravity. So sometimes nature does that. And that's what a planet is. A planet is an engine of complexity in the cosmos. Because if you go out into the cosmos and grab a bunch of matter and put it together close enough, gravity is going to pull it together, right? Well, if you put too much matter, like Charlie said a minute ago, too much matter, it'll become a star. It'll create nuclear fusion, and then you don't get this great flowering of complexity. Because there's a lot of complexity in a star, but not nearly as much as there is in a planet. Okay, but if you don't put enough matter, then all you get is an asteroid. You get Phobos or Deimos. It's just a dead rock, right? It's just a lump of rock. But there's still complexity there, but not as much as a planet. right? But if you put enough matter in that sweet spot between an asteroid like Phobos, which is a moon, but it's an asteroid, it's a size moon, but between Phobos and between a small star, in that sweet range, suddenly you'll get matter will be convecting and energy will be convecting through the mantle, and you'll get stratification, you get reworking of the chemistry, and you get this flowering of mineralogies and crustal features, and you can get outgassing of volatiles and atmospheres and oceans, and you get reworking of the chemistry and organics, and we don't even know how it happens, but we know at least one of these planets has life and civilization on it. And that's why when Galileo and Kepler and everybody saw the mountains on the moon, they immediately leapt to, it's plausible that they have civilizations, because planets are where that stuff happens. So that concept of a planet, in my opinion, because it's a crucial part of the great chain of origins, it is one of the most important concepts in all of science. And so I don't want to ruin that concept by saying, well, if it orbits a star directly, it's a planet, but if it orbits a star indirectly by orbiting another planet, then it's not a planet. That just really has very little reductionist value, that kind of a taxonomy. And it undercuts and kind of ruins Galileo's and Kepler's great insight that they gave us.
And before we continue this discussion, and I want to get into some of this complexity, I just want to take a moment to do a station identification. You are watching the CosmoQuest Hangoutathon 2020 live on twitch.tv/CosmoQuestX, or Now Media Radio, going out on the airwaves and Apple TV and Roku. Wherever you are watching, we're glad you're here, and you can drop me a question either using Twitter and the hashtag #hat2020, or by messaging me through the Twitch chat channel, where we had a fabulous comment earlier where Broken Symmetry wrote, "Can I get a venti Jupiter hot with butterscotch drizzle?" And at this point in streaming, where we're about to enter hour 10, I would like a venti Jupiter hot with butterscotch drizzle, as long as you mean a coffee made out of Jupiter beans. I don't know if that's a thing, but it should be. It should be. So we are raising money to support science, citizen science, and science communications. If you like content like this and you have the money to give, and I know a lot of you don't, please consider giving. We're only able to do the things we do because of people like you. And we're really proud to say that we're able to offer even our part-time staff medical benefits during these crazy pandemic times, but only because of you. So if you're not hurting, if you're doing okay, please consider making a donation. We're all going to get through this together, and we're only going to do this by helping each other out. All right, going back to discussing planets. I'm going to make things lighthearted for a minute. Do you remember where you were when you found out Pluto was no longer a planet? I was on my honeymoon, and because of this occurring, I was not at IAU, and I found myself in a hotel room, much to the dismay of my brand new husband, arranging to do recordings with Fraser Cain a couple days later, because science doesn't care what you're doing in the real world. Charlie, you were in the 4th grade. Do you have a particular moment you remember?
I do remember being at home and having, my dad likes to read me the news a lot. And so he knew that I was really interested in space. And so he came in and told me that Pluto was demoted. And then I remember going into school the next day and asking my teacher why Pluto was demoted. And she was just kind of like, I don't really know, because she's a 4th grade elementary school teacher. And so it was just kind of decided that Pluto's not a planet anymore, and we're just going to move on and not ask you about it in the curriculum anymore. And it was just kind of a open and closed book.
And now we shall just ignore this world. Phil, what about you? Where were you when you first heard?
Well, in 2006, I had just helped found a lab at NASA to do technologies for resource extraction. And I remember hearing the news, and I remember thinking, well, that's weird, but okay. And then I heard the argument about, well, they don't clear their orbit, just like Pluto doesn't clear its orbit, like asteroids don't. So therefore, it's a planet, not a planet. And it is a question-begging argument, like, but why not? Why does that matter? But I just accepted it. I think most of us want to be good team players, and the IAU said it. And so I think I wanted to be a good team player and just kind of went along with it.
And that's the hard one about this. And we're going to bring it up some more in the next hour, which is titled Trello or It Won't Happen, the rules of the CosmoQuest community. And one of the things that comes up is when there's these moments that appear to have the ability to change or not change science and how we do it, we tend to react either by latching onto the idea or by pushing it away. Very rarely do we have I'm just going to wait and see approach to things like Pluto no longer being a planet. But these are the kinds of things that when someone, or in this case, the International Astronomical Union, makes this kind of a declaration, we're humans. We change our minds. Once upon a time in this country, we made alcohol illegal. Tonight, we're going to be talking about where to find the ingredients for a good drink when you're not on the planet Earth. Times change. Ideas change. Where do you think we're going to be in 20 years when I know I have been very much, okay, here's the rules, here's why the rules say it, here's why the rules are missing. Pluto's not a planet until you give me back Sirius. How do you think you're going to explain this time 20 years from now? Where do you think we're going to be? Is this going to be the prohibition on dwarf planets period that we simply write off as a crazy time of the past?
Well, there's that famous saying, it was Max Planck who said, science advances one funeral at a time.
I'm going to cut you off because we just got a donation for $514.50 and another donation from Kyle for $102, bringing us up to $36.75 in donations. And something that was going on behind the scenes is I typed into the Twitch chat that I could smell bacon being cooked. And I can't access the bacon because I'm here asking for donations. I am missing out on bacon because of you. And I said that if $500 was donated, I would go mug the other occupants of my house for bacon during the next break. So in 14 minutes, when we go to, in fact, they're telling me to go get bacon now. And Adventure Addict is saying she would totally bring me bacon, and I know she would because she's brought me bacon before. I'm going to ask the two of you to talk amongst yourselves, and I'm going to go mug the people in my house who have bacon for bacon, because not just $500, but $600 came in, and Pixel Risk just gave us a shout out for Phobos. So we're here dissing a world, and it's getting built in Minecraft. All right, so I'll still have my headset, so my headset doesn't last that far. You guys talk. I'm gonna go get bacon.
All right. So Charlie, this is, by the way, for everybody out there, this is the first time I've actually met Charlie. We've emailed before, but great to meet you, Charlie.
Yeah, it's good to meet you too, Phil.
Yeah, and you're in Alaska, is that right?
Yeah, so I am a master's student at University of Alaska, but right now I'm in North Carolina with my family because our semesters all got moved online, and so I'm
Oh,
back
yeah,
home with my
yeah.
family for right
I have two daughters who are in college as well, and they're not really enjoying the Zoom classes. Um,
now. Yeah, me neither. Thankfully, it's my last semester of classes, so next semester is my thesis writing semester, so
right,
that's fine.
right. So what are you doing your thesis on?
I'm studying tectonics on Europa and how they may or may not relate to plate tectonics on Europa.
Wow. Okay, so now I know I found papers in the literature that were talking about the ice plates on Europa and calling Europa a planet in that context. So tell me, do a little comparative planetology here. Tell us, what could you compare about the plate tectonics or the tectonics on Europa, and how does that relate to other planetary bodies in our solar system?
So obviously the only planet that we know that has plate tectonics right now is Earth. And so when you're looking for evidence of plate tectonics somewhere else, you need evidence of clear plate boundaries and you need evidence of lateral shearing, so plates moving across and next to each other. And on Europa, we have evidence of transform boundaries. We have evidence of dilational boundaries. And then most recently, we've found evidence of contractional boundaries, but it's a little bit different from Earth contractional. So on Earth, you have subduction zones. On Europa, you have subsumption. And the difference is that the plate does not go into the mantle, it just kind of melts into the lower crust.
Wow.
Um, but my
So,
aspect of the project is searching for evidence of that shearing of the two plates. And so I do a lot of mapping and a lot of modeling to try and see if I can find anything.
that is super cool. And so while you're talking about melting and stuff, then Pamela's waving the bacon at the camera. So, and now the bacon is subducting into the mouth.
I grabbed bacon and wet wipes. This was the summary of my adventures, and it is excellent, thick, oven baked bacon that was baked on a rack, so it's nice and crispy.
Awesome.
So thank you all so very much. Um, I also ended up with a dog that is very, very interested in the
Did the dog
bacon.
get any bacon?
I'm sure the dog will get bacon, just not before I get bacon.
When I cook, my dog has learned to sit in front of the stove and look cute, and the dog eventually gets something.
So
He's always in the way when I'm trying to cook.
right. So the largest of our three dogs, Eddie, is always in the way when we're cooking because he knows if he trips us, he gets more. This is the way it works. So folks saying donate more to get the dogs more stuff. If we break $5,000, I will set up a dog cam to show you cute, happy dogs as part of the show. So you have a challenge, people. You have a challenge. There is a dog cam at $5,000. Yes, I will even feed the dogs bacon. Um, so right now we are in this weird situation where the IAU has dictated what it means to be a planet, and I think everyone is universally unhappy with the current definition. Do we try and change that, or we just sort of ignore it? What's your take?
Well, my take is Alan has convinced me that we don't want to go back and ask the IAU to revote because they just shouldn't have voted anyways. You know, we don't want a new definition. I mean, it would be nice if they would take back the definitions to say we don't have a definition anymore. I mean, fine, have a bureaucratic definition to decide who gets to name the Kuiper Belt objects, but don't tell the world that this is now the scientific definition of a planet that informs our view of the cosmos. So I think that we just need to let science take its time, and over time, we'll figure out how people use the word. we'll figure out if people like to use orbit clearing as their fundamentum divisionis for the planet concept, or will they go with gravitational rounding like Charlie was talking about?
With stars, we still sort of push off to the side brown dwarf stars, which are objects massive enough that they temporarily, we think, burned deuterium or tritium. These are heavy forms of hydrogen that have extra neutrons down in their core. And they don't maintain those nuclear reactions. They're about 80 times the size of Jupiter. Smaller than that, 80 is the top boundary. Do you think we'll reach the point where we just have certain objects that we're like, meh, like brown dwarfs that we just sort of push off to the side, like Phobos and Deimos? Or will there be a clean boundary between boring rock and actual planet?
Well, my opinion is that we don't really need mathematical precision in these concepts. In fact, linguists, I was reading some papers, and linguists were saying that the fuzziness of concepts is a feature, not a bug, because it enables communication. If we had precise definitions, we would spend all of our time getting caught up on the boundaries, and it would actually hinder us. But on the other hand, working out the boundaries is a useful activity in science sometimes. So it doesn't really bother me that much. And by the way, for an analogy, I think planet is the most important word in planetary science. And arguably the most important word in evolutionary biology is species, right?
Okay.
But the word species has resisted a definition since before Darwin. For over 150 years, biologists have been publishing papers. Every year, papers are published arguing over what the definition of species ought to be. And they've resisted ever voting on it. And but they do feel that they're moving towards consensus after 1.5 centuries of effort.
And there's Lynn Primble is one of our community members who I have screen captured more of the things they've written than I probably want to admit to, because they bring me so much joy in what they often write. And the latest message is, considering the size difference, can't the small planets just be considered dust? It's all a matter of perspective. One person's asteroid is another person's pebble. Um, oh, where to go from here? Where to go from here? Thank you, Fenmil, for sharing things out with the chat. Thank you. So we have 4 minutes before we go to Minds on the Nines with Ms. Britt Kitten. Before we do that, this is ongoing work. We're going to be talking about this more on CosmoQuest, working to bring together people from both sides, from the we need a solid definition, and then bringing you back to discuss, no, maybe we don't. Where do we go from here, moving the conversation forward, and where can people go to follow not just this work, but all the work that you do? Charlie, I'm going to go to you first.
So to answer the last question of where you can follow us, I know that Phil has a Twitter, and I have a Twitter as well that is at moose_juice_13. And I try my best to promote recent work that's been done to define what a planet is and is not. And so you can follow me on there for that type of content, also other geology related content.
Phil?
So yeah, and we will be putting up. By the way, so my Twitter is Dr. Phil Till, DrPhilTill. And by the way, Charlie, you've got the best Twitter handle. I love that.
Thank you.
13. Yeah, so we're going to be putting a paper out really soon where we go through the history of the word planet, from Galileo until today. We didn't really get a chance to talk about it today, but it was in the 1800s when the general public switched from geocentrism to heliocentrism that they created this folk taxonomy, which really came with heavy astrology influences. And that's why we say moons aren't planets. It came from them, from then. But we're going to put the paper out there, which explains and shows in detail the records that prove this. This is how it came about. And then how the IAU unwittingly adopted an astrology definition in 2006. And why we think that the geophysical definition is much more rich and scientifically valuable than that one.
I love the idea that by accident someone adopted an astrological definition. One of my favorite practical jokes ever, and this is something that you should play on your colleagues when given the opportunity, as long as they haven't also heard this story. Back in the mid to late 90s, a board observer called up on the phone Dr. Bill Cochran, who'd recently discovered a planet around Beta Cygni, and played at having a Indian accent. This was a researcher that worked half-time in the subcontinent, and said they needed the ephemeris for the planet for their astrologer so that they could account for all the planets in figuring out a wedding date. And this was apparently a truly preposterous conversation that went on for quite some time before the board astronomer, who was clouded out, admitted to who they were, much to the chagrin of the baffled planetary scientist. And I just love that that ever happened. So, do you have any parting words in the final minute, Charlie?
No.
Okay, that is a valid parting answer. Phil, any parting words?
Well, I'll just say go follow Charlie's Twitter, because I just checked it out. I just checked it out today when I was, putting your handle on the tweet about this CosmoQuest thing. And I scrolled down and you've got the best Twitter feed. Beautiful pictures of geology in Alaska. And it's really exciting. So go follow moose_juice_13 and get your geology fix. So that's my final shout out.
All right, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, both of you, for being with us. And we're now going to go to Minds on the 49s. Thank you once again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, Ms. Britt Kitten, we have you on screen, and that's a lot of text. I see someone frolicking through the screen. Oh, I can't hear you. Hold on. Let me see if that's me. I don't think it's me.
Is it me?
Yes, now I hear you.
All right. Excellent. Yeah, there's a lot of text on the screen. There's a lot of chat going on. There's a lot of everything going on. And
I'm going to mute my audio and watch, but eat bacon.
I am live. Eat bacon. I want bacon. Anyhow, so Overworld, welcome Center. A division of Kittytronics Inc. Anyhow, we have construction going on all over the place. We have the starts of a rocket over on our rocket pad over here. We have some beds because, maybe it's a good idea to take a nap in the grass because it's a good idea. Someone labeled it body storage. The bed is where you store your body at night when you need to shut it down for a little bit. I agree with that. We have large progress over here on the Library of Doom. The most informational library. It will be coming along. It looks like there's a lot going on here. We will see how that comes along as we progress. Our shuttle, a beautiful shuttle constructed just randomly in the grass behind a welcome center because, well, we all know that the shuttles have been retired, so that's nice. Not a bad place to store it. Little fountain. We have the observatory up top. We have our fun little lunar lander module that's looks about built. It might be half built. We'll have to figure that out. But let's jump into the solar system because there has been quite a bit of progress since last I checked in. You know, since last everyone checked in. So I'm going to bounce in here. We have the sun. We all have seen a lot of the sun. Mercury, I don't believe anything has really changed at Mercury. Except for it looks like it is fairly close to finished. It's almost there. And as I try to fall out of the universe, that would be a bad thing. Not that I can really die, but... Alright, so let's go back to the center. Mercury's looking good. We will go to Venus next, see if there's any updates on Venus. Venus is still about the last time I saw it, still at the same place it is. Uh-oh. What do we have here? It looks like we have a sign. It says phosphine. Uh-oh. I guess we found a phosphine on Venus. Alright, now let's back to the core of the sun. I am in a person's head. That's what happens when you teleport. We have made great strides at Earth. We have North and South America. We're working on Greenland and the poles. There's some more continents going in on the eastern side of the hemispheres. It's looking good. There is a core, if we can manage to fly in there. Welcome to the core of the sun. Magma with iron and glass and fire and magma and more iron and glass. It looks beautiful. Oh, alright. The moon. We'll go visit the moon real quick, see if anyone's added any more Easter eggs. Quick orbit around the moon shows us that it is about the same. It looks pretty finished. And we're going to leave the moon there for now. Back to the sun. Again, I end up in somebody's head. Hi, Trilance. Alright. Let's see, that was Earth. We are now headed out to Mars. And Mars got a bit of an addition here. If we fly over to the North Pole of Mars and we look out, we see a little label over there. We see a little label over there. If we fly out all the way over here, look, we put Deimos in. It is a button, because that's about the scale of it. And if we look over here, we have Phobos. Phobos is the inner moon. This is the one that will crash into Mars at some point in the future, probably long after you and I are gone, but it is on a rendezvous course to collide with the surface of Mars. I think I said Jupiter. That would have been bad. Anyhow, let's go back, because the next step is we want to see Jupiter, 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 Jupiter. All right. So we have continuing work at Jupiter. There's a lot of beautiful work going on here. We're getting the striations in the atmosphere, and looks like Jupiter has gained a core too. Looks like it's light blue, bright blue. No, it's diamonds and polished andesite. Why? Well, there's a possible theory that Jupiter has a diamond and metallic hydrogen core, and to represent that, I went ahead and put in a core of diamond and a core polished andesite to represent the potential theory. So a nice, beautiful, solid diamond core, and as we move out, we see some of that metallic hydrogen clustering around that diamond core. It's looking good out here, people. Hi, Hex. All right. Next place we're going to go ahead and drop back to the sun. Again, I end up at someone's head. And let's go to Saturn. I believe there's quite a bit of work going to Saturn. Let's go ahead and bounce in. And that was one of our newer builders. She's jumping in and helping out a lot. We have I don't think we've made much progress here. We do have some rings going on. Those are still being constructed very carefully. And we're looking good here. We may need to get some more people over here on Saturn. We have been talking a lot about Uranus and Neptune, so let's go and get a look at what we have going on there. Hello again, Shadow. Hi there. All right, let's see. Let's hit Uranus. So I have to say, I have power, and when I have power, sometimes people come and ask me, "Hey, can you do us a thing?" And the request was made to do, instead of the white ghost sphere, we went ahead and did a blue ghost sphere with blue concrete behind it as the base layers of Uranus, because that is a good start for the very, very blue blob of gas out in the outer solar system. I believe they are starting to plan on the rings that are going to be tilted 90 degrees to the ecliptic, and as soon as we figure out the math on which way the sun is from here, I'll figure that out in a bit and post a sign there. There's a number 4 here. I have no idea why. And we have a little bit of discussion going on about what the pellet for the rings are going to be. All right. Rings, storms. So there's lots of little white storms scuttling around the surface of Uranus, and we're going to try and model some of those in. All right, I'm going to bounce back. And I request guides for the rings. Deeping, that will probably happen. All right, so let's go out to Neptune, and again, we had a request to replace the ghost spheres with a different color. Make it a little bit easier on us for these more basic planets, instead of placing hundreds of thousands of blocks all the same color. What I can do, and I'll give you a quick demonstration of how I make these spheres. So if I go here to the center here, and I say I want to make a little core for our friend Neptune here, let's do a hollow sphere. And we're just gonna leave it one color. Let's just make it white. White stained glass. So white stained glass, and I'll give it a radius. Let's go 10 blocks. And that is the world edit mod that I have installed on the server. And now there's a sphere there that someone can build an overlay on. And that's how I've started with all of the planets, is just by running that command at the appropriate diameter for the world, for the planet that we're working on. All right, how are we doing there, Pamela?
I have a mouthful
Dr.
of rice. Not rice, bagel.
Okay.
I don't know if you can
let's
hear me.
see, anything
Apparently you
else
can't.
new? I believe we're still working on Pluto. Or Pluto's pretty much done at this point. It is pretty
So
tiny little planet.
I was just saying I had a mouthful of bagel, and then I realized as the audience could hear me speaking with my mouth full that you couldn't.
Oh, so you were talking to the audience, maybe talking to me, and I heard nothing, and that's okay. So, what do you think, Dr. Pamela? How are we doing?
I think this is absolutely amazing. I love what is everywhere. We have a behind the scenes drop in. Mark Sykes, our Planetary Science Institute CEO, has just dropped in, and I don't know if he wants to be on camera, which he isn't right now. But he was scheduled for the prior hour, but it looks like you were off enjoying the universe, and I'm gonna bring your audio in. So give me just a minute to figure out how to. I'm not ashamed of you. Actually, I have you small on screen. So we have Minecraft up on screen. I'm trying to figure out how to do all the things simultaneously and not have you with somebody else's name underneath you, because that would be mean. Okay, let me make sure I have Kitten's audio. Um, and I'm the next speaker, so we're doing fine on time. I just need to figure out which button to press. There we go. Um, so we have you on screen, Mark. We have.
I just want to apologize for not being here the last hour. I had it down on my calendar for
I don't think I
Sunday,
can
and I don't
hear
know how
you.
that happened, but it's on the schedule for 4 o'clock on Sunday, my time, and yeah, so I messed up because I was really looking forward to that discussion about planets, because planets are just and how we think of them and how we look at them is really interesting. So
Well, we're going to just have to do that conversation again later.
Oh, yeah.
And you can make it up to us by showing up sometime tomorrow when you might already have it on the schedule. We'll pitch some times to you. I know Beth is in the background.
Yeah, more than happy to come in. I'll even dress for the occasion.
That works. So we're going to go back to doing a final look around the solar system, and then we're going to switch on over to discussing, well, how it is. Mark, I'm taking you off camera, and see you tomorrow. And thank you, Sebastian, for the donation. So what world are we looking at now that appears to have... Oh, this is Jupiter from the back.
Yes. So just to get an idea, as Pixel Riffs was discussing earlier, this is the largest planet in the solar system. We are at build limit from 0 to 255. You cannot place a block below it. You can't place a block above it. And we have people still working on it, making the storms. We have Hex currently, and I believe we have... Who else do we have here? Katie is here. They're helping out as well. We have the Great Red Spot, which is just amazing. The texture is gorgeous. And as I said earlier, I added a diamond and metallic hydrogen core just to make it look pretty spiffy. And
this is just amazing.
We just have this. This is just... You can see the wisps of clouds and the banding starting to come together. And this one right here, Jupiter, is probably the biggest challenge we have this weekend. To get this skinned out, to make sure that it looks looks amazing. We have a lot of people putting a lot of really beautiful effort into this project, and
yeah.
I'm looking forward to how it progresses as the hours keep continuing to pass.
And I just want to say thank you, because you are the human who set up, with the help of Joseph Rooks, all of this server, and then worked to get everyone out there, setting up the way station, setting up the welcome center. And your leadership on this has been impeccable, is the word that's coming to mind. It doesn't feel like the right word, but it's the one we're going to go with.
Fair enough. After we get more of these bigger worlds built, I will start putting in the way stations for the smaller worlds that are out on the thing. The biggest challenge is these bigger worlds.
Yeah.
I might start putting them in a little bit sooner, because some of us might need a break from placing block after block after block after block after block, and just might want to do a 4-wide sphere taking care of a KB object real quickly.
Yeah, sometimes you just need a Kuiper belt object. You really do.
And Dr. Pamela, did you see the moon's... My button just disappeared.
Oh no.
Someone else went traveling. Wait. Oh, there I am. Did you see the moons around Mars?
I did. I love that we're sitting here dissing on Phobos and Deimos, and y'all are out there building them to show us just how important they actually are.
There's a little Phobos. This is the one that is
Smaller
fair.
than the letters.
It is. That's why I put the label on them. We put the label on it so you can stand right here at the top North Pole. Out there you can see Deimos just chilling. And over there you can see the label for Phobos. And we put the label on because you cannot see the little item that it is. But you can see the name tag.
That is excellent. So do we have any police boxes in space yet?
I have not seen one pop up yet.
Okay.
That should be something that should get rectified.
So
Because honestly, there needs to be police boxes in space. Especially there should be one right here on Mars. Absolutely.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So hopefully when we come back, there'll be at least one blue box awaiting its madman to explore the universe.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Kitten. I'm now going to awkwardly find the buttons to transition to myself.
All right.
By myself.
Thank you very much.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye-bye.